Celestine walked into the Quan Empire headquarters on a Tuesday morning, wearing a burnt orange wrap dress that stretched over her round belly, her edges laid, her chin lifted like she owned the building. Security tried to stop her at the front desk. She handed them a sealed envelope and said, "Tell Mr. Quan his pass just walked through the front door." The receptionist, a thin woman named Patrice, looked at Celestine's stomach, then at her face, then back at the envelope, and called upstairs. Celestine sat down in the waiting area like she had all the time in the world. She didn't. Her back was aching, her ankles were swollen, and she hadn't slept more than 3 hours the night before. But she sat with her spine straight and her hands folded over her belly. Not because she had learned a long time ago, you do not let powerful people see you flinch. Dominic Quan was on a conference call with investors in Seoul when his assistant knocked twice and entered without being invited. That alone told him something was wrong. He held up one finger to the camera, muted himself, and looked at her. She placed the envelope on his desk and whispered, "There's a woman downstairs, sir. She says it's urgent. She says it's personal." Dominic looked at the envelope. His name was written on the front in handwriting he didn't recognize. He picked it up, turned it over, and something in his chest went very still. He told his investors he would call them back. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a DNA report, his name at the top, and at the bottom, a paternity probability, 99.9%. He read it 3 times. Then he sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment, because this was impossible. Dominic Jaewon Quan was 41 years old. He had built his empire from the ground up, real estate, tech, private equity, all of it stacked on the foundation of control. He controlled everything in his world, his schedule, his image, his relationships. He had been married once, to a woman named Serena. They had tried for years to have children, and after rounds of testing and heartbreak and silence that stretched between them like a canyon, the doctors told him the truth. His sperm count was critically low, almost non-existent. The chances of natural conception were essentially 0. Serena had looked at him across a doctor's office with something in her eyes he never forgot. Not sadness, something worse, relief. She left 8 months later. Dominic had rebuilt himself after that. He told himself he didn't need children. He didn't need legacy. He didn't need any of it. He had his empire. He had his control. And then, a stranger walked into his building with a belly full of proof that everything he believed about himself was wrong. He took the elevator down himself. His assistant tried to follow him. He told her to stay. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, he saw her. Celestine was standing now because sitting had become uncomfortable. She was watching the elevator like she already knew it would be him stepping out. Their eyes met across the marble floor. And something happened in that moment that neither of them would be able to explain later. Not recognition exactly, not attraction. Something deeper than both. Like a door opening in a wall you didn't know existed. Dominic walked toward her slowly. He was a tall man, broad shoulders, sharp jaw, the kind of Korean features softened by years of American sun. He stopped 2 feet away from her. He looked at her face, then at her stomach, then back at her face. He said very quietly, "Who are you?" Celestine tilted her head. "My name is Celestine Monroe, and before you say a single word about that report being fake..." She reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder. "Here's the chain of custody documentation from the lab. Here's the original sample collection receipt. And here," she pulled out a third document, "is the letter from your own doctor confirming the sample number matches your records from 2019. Dominic didn't reach for the folders. He just looked at her. "How?" he said. Not a question, almost a whisper. Celestine's jaw tightened. "That," she said, "is what I'm here to find out. Because I have never met you before in my life, Mr. Quan. And I need you to understand that I am not here for your money. I am not here for a relationship. I am here because my child deserves to know the truth about where they came from, and because someone used both of us." Her voice cracked just slightly. And I want to know who. The lobby was completely silent. The security guard behind the desk was pretending to look at his computer. Patrice at the reception desk had stopped typing entirely. Dominic stared at this woman, this stranger who had walked into his world with a storm inside her belly. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. He brought her upstairs, not to his office, to the private conference room on the 42nd floor. He ordered water and food without asking if she wanted it. She was going to eat because she looked tired, and because whatever was happening, his child was inside her. His child. He was still trying to hold that sentence in his mind without dropping it. Celestine sat across the table and accepted the water. She did not touch the food right away. She opened her folder. She was organized. He noticed that immediately. Every document was tabbed, color-coded, dated. She had brought everything. I worked, she corrected herself, as a research coordinator at Holloway Medical Group. About 14 months ago, I participated in what I was told was a fertility research study. Voluntary. I was having some health concerns of my own, and the study offered free comprehensive testing. Dominic leaned forward. Holloway Medical. You know it. It wasn't a question. She had seen the flash of recognition in his eyes. I donated samples there, he said slowly. Years ago, as part of a research agreement. They were studying low fertility cases. Celestine nodded like she had already known this. Someone, she said, used your archived sample, without your consent, without mine. They fertilized me during what I thought was a routine procedure. Her voice went tight. And I didn't find out until my 20-week scan when my OB flagged an anomaly in my file, and I started digging. The room was very quiet. Dominic felt something moving through him like electricity. Rage, cold and precise. Who? He said. I have a name, Celestine said. But I need to know how far you're willing to go, because the person behind this is connected. And they have money, and they will bury this if we let them. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I have more money than they do. Celestine studied his face. She had prepared for many versions of this meeting. She had prepared for denial, for lawyers, for security dragging her out of the building. And she had not prepared for him to believe her this quickly. Why do you believe me? She asked. Just like that? Dominic was quiet for a moment. Because, he said, the report is real. I can see that, and because... He paused. No woman who was lying would walk in here this prepared. Celestine looked at him. Then she looked down at her belly. Then she said, very quietly, I need you to understand something, Mr. Kwan. This child is mine. Whatever we figure out, whatever legal arrangement we reach, I am this baby's mother. I have been here every single day for 8 months. I have been scared every single day for 8 months. I did this alone, and I will not be pushed to the side. I'm not trying to push you anywhere, he said. Not yet, she replied, but you will want to. Men like you always do. He held her gaze. Men like me, he repeated slowly, powerful, controlled, used to owning things. A long beat. Then something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. Fair, he said. She gave him the name. Dr. Raymond Ashby, the director of the Fertility Research Division at Holloway Medical, and when Dominic heard that name, something shifted behind his eyes. Celestine caught it. You know him, she said. He testified against me, Dominic said carefully, during a lawsuit 3 years ago. A competitor was trying to acquire one of my medical tech holdings. Ashby provided documentation that was used against me. Celestine stared at him. So this wasn't random, she said slowly. No, Dominic said. I don't think it was. He stood up and walked to the window. 42 floors up, the city spread below them like a circuit board. He wanted to create a liability, Dominic said, almost to himself. A child I didn't know about, DNA proof, a scandal, something he could use or sell at the right moment. Celestine's hands tightened on the folder. He used me, she said. He used my body. Yes. Dominic turned to face her. and I am going to make sure he answers for it." The way he said it wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Celestine had fought alone for months. She had cried in parking lots. She had stared at ultrasound images and wondered how she was going to do this. She had promised herself she would never let a man see her fall apart. But something about the certainty in his voice made her eyes go hot. She blinked it away fast. Dominic noticed. He didn't say anything about it. Instead, he said, "Are you hungry? You haven't touched the food." And somehow, that was what almost broke her. They talked for 3 more hours. By the end, Dominic had called his legal team, his private investigator, and his head of security. Celestine had answered every question with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times. But as the meeting wound down and his team filed out and it was just the two of them again, Dominic asked, "Is there someone with you? At home?" Celestine lifted her chin. "I have people." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him. "My mother is in Atlanta," she said. "She wants to come." I told her I had it handled. "Do you?" A long pause. "I always have it handled," she said. He nodded slowly. "Where are you staying?" "I have an apartment. I'm fine." "Celestine." He said her name like he had been saying it for years. Something about that startled her. "You are 8 months pregnant. You are the key witness in what is about to become a federal investigation into medical malpractice and fraud. You are not fine. You are in danger." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew he was right. She had known it for weeks. She just hadn't let herself say it out loud. He put her in a company residence. It was not a suggestion. It was not a demand either. He was careful about that. He laid out the security reasoning, the legal reasoning, the practical reasoning. And then he said, "You don't have to stay, but I would like you to." Celestine looked around the apartment. 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a nursery already partially furnished because some executive had been expecting a baby and relocated. She looked at the little white crib in the corner, and something in her chest came undone quietly. "One condition," she said. "Name it." "I make my own decisions about this pregnancy. Every single one. You do not get to override my doctors, my birth plan, or my choices. You are the biological father. That is all you are right now. We are not friends. We are not," she gestured vaguely, "anything. We are 2 people who were wronged by the same man and we are handling it. That's it." Dominic held her gaze. "Agreed," he said. She nodded. "Oh, then I'll stay." That was week 1. Week 2 was harder, because Dominic Kwan could not stay away. He told himself it was about the investigation. He needed updates. He needed to review documents with her. He needed to understand the timeline, but he started showing up at 7 in the morning with coffee she hadn't asked for. He started staying 2 hours longer than necessary when they went over case files. He started asking questions that had nothing to do with Dr. Ashby. "What do you want to name the baby?" Celestine looked up from the documents spread across the dining table. "Excuse me? Have you thought about names?" She stared at him. "Dominic." "Jay," he said. "You can call me Jay." She blinked. "Nobody calls you that." "You can." A long moment stretched between them. Celestine looked back down at her papers. "I've been thinking about Solomon," she said quietly. "For a boy. Or Zola for a girl." A pause. "Solomon," Dominic repeated. "That's strong." "Yes," she said, "strong and wise, which is what this child is going to need to be, considering how they got here." Dominic was quiet. Then softly, "I'm sorry for what was done to you." Celestine's pen stopped moving. She didn't look up. "You didn't do it," she said. "No, but your body was used to connect to mine without your knowledge. That is," he paused. "I think about it. More than I should." She finally looked at him. His face was open in a way she hadn't seen before. The CEO mask was off. He just looked like a man who was carrying something heavy. "I think about it too," she admitted. And then she looked away, because that was enough honesty for one night. The investigation moved fast. Dominic's team uncovered the paper trail within 10 days. Dr. Raymond Ashby had run an unsanctioned program inside the research division. He had used archived donor samples, including Dominic's, to impregnate 5 women without their knowledge. Celestine was not the only one. When she found out, she sat in the corner of the living room with her hand on her belly, and she breathed very carefully. Dominic sat beside her, not across the room, beside her. 5 women, she said. Yes, 5 of us walking around, not knowing. We're locating the others. My team is 5 women, she said again, and her voice finally cracked. We were nothing to him. We were just instruments, just bodies he could use. Dominic reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull away. She stared at their joined hands for a long moment. His thumb moved slowly over her knuckles. You are not nothing, he said quietly. You walked into my building with proof and courage and fire when most people would have fallen apart. You are extraordinary, Celestine. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet. She hated that. She hated that he could see it. But she was too tired to pretend tonight. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared of what comes after. The birth, the legal case, being a mother, all of it. I know. You're going to be involved, she said slowly. Whether I want you to be or not, I've accepted that. Whether you want me to be, he said carefully, or whether you come to want me to be, those are 2 different things. She looked at him. Don't, she said softly. Don't what? Make me like you. It'll just complicate everything. And Dominic Kwan, a man who controlled everything, smiled at that and said nothing. The federal case against Dr. Raymond Ashby broke publicly on a Thursday. The headlines were brutal. Fertility researcher charged with criminal medical fraud. 5 women unknowingly impregnated using unauthorized donor samples. Kwan Empire linked to medical scandal. CEO speaks out. That last one made Celestine's stomach drop. She was eating breakfast when Dominic came in with his phone. He showed her the statement he'd prepared. She read it once, then again. Then she looked up. You mentioned me by name, she said. I did. I told you I wanted to stay out of the press. You told me you didn't want to be a spectacle, he corrected. This statement positions you as what you are, a victim who fought back. It is respectful. It is powerful. It protects you legally. She stared at him. You made this decision without asking me. You're right. He held her gaze. That was wrong. Do you want me to pull it? A pause. He was serious. She could see it. She looked back at the statement. It was good. It was exactly how she would have wanted it written. But that wasn't the point. Next time, she said tightly, you ask me first. Yes, he said simply. I will. She pushed the phone back. Don't pull it, it's good. He nodded. She picked up her fork. You're infuriating, she muttered. I've been told. And you're not sorry. A tiny pause. I'm sorry about the process, he said. Not the outcome. Is that honest enough? Celestine looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Sit down, eat something. You look terrible. And just like that, the ground between them shifted a little more. The baby came on a Friday night, 3 weeks early. Celestine had been in the middle of reviewing deposition documents when the pain hit, sharp and low and urgent. She called out for Dominic without even thinking. He was there in under 30 seconds. He took one look at her face and was already reaching for his phone and her go bag at the same time. In the car, she gripped the door handle and breathed through her teeth. He drove with one hand and held her hand with the other. She said, I'm not going to cry. He said, You can cry. She said, I know I can. I'm choosing not to. He said, Okay. She said, Talk to me. I need to not think. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, When I was 7, my grandmother in Busan used to make me recite the names of every river in Korea before dinner, every night. I hated it. She breathed through a contraction. Why? Because I wanted to watch TV, but she said a man who knows the land knows himself. Celestine almost laughed. Almost. Did it work? I know every river in Korea, he said, and I know myself very well, so I suppose yes. She tightened her grip on his hand. Tell me the rivers, she said, and he did, all the way to the hospital. He listed rivers in a low, steady voice, and she breathed. He stayed. She hadn't asked him to. She hadn't told him to leave either. He stayed in the corner of the delivery room, out of the way, quiet and present in the way that very few people know how to be. When it got hard, really hard, he moved closer. He held her hand without being asked. He told the nurse what Celestine needed before Celestine could get the words out, because he had listened over these past weeks. He knew she hated being cold. He knew she needed something to focus on. He knew she would not ask for help even when she needed it, so he just gave it. And at 2:47 in the morning, Solomon Kwan Monroe entered the world. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of dark curly hair, the loudest cry the delivery ward had heard that week, according to the nurses. And Celestine held him against her chest, and her whole face broke open. Not in sadness, in something that had no name. She looked at this child who had come through fire to get here, through fraud and violation and months of fear and fighting. And she said, very softly, "Hi, baby. I've been waiting for you." Dominic stood at the edge of the bed. His face was doing something it had never done publicly. It was completely unguarded. Celestine looked up at him, and she said, "Do you want to hold him?" He couldn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded. She placed Solomon in his arms, and Dominic Kwan, who had been told he would never have this, looked down at his son. And the last wall inside him came down. Quietly, without ceremony, like a door closing that had been open too long. The weeks after the birth were a war of a different kind. Ashby's lawyers tried to argue that the samples had been used within the consent parameters of the original research agreement. It was a lie wrapped in legal language. Celestine, barely 3 weeks postpartum, sat in a deposition with Solomon in a carrier on her chest, because she refused to be absent, and she took apart their argument document by document. She had been a research coordinator. She knew what those consent forms said, and she knew what they did not say. The opposing lawyer tried to rattle her 3 different times. 3 different times. She answered him in a voice so steady it made the court reporter look up. After the deposition, Dominic's lead attorney pulled him aside and said, "Gee, she's going to be the best witness we've ever had." Dominic looked through the glass at Celestine, still in the conference room, nursing Solomon, reading through documents, making notes, and said, "I know." But the case was not the only war. There was the war inside the company. 3 members of Dominic's board had started making noise. The scandal, even though Dominic was the victim, had made investors nervous. And then came the meeting that changed everything. One board member, a man named Preston Hale, 60 years old money, old thinking, stood up in the boardroom and said that the situation was creating reputational liability. He suggested Dominic take a temporary step back from leadership. He suggested the company distance itself from the circumstances surrounding the child. Dominic was very still. "The circumstances surrounding the child," he repeated slowly. "It's not personal, Dominic." "Say it clearly," Dominic said. His voice was low, but the room went cold. "You want me to pretend my son does not exist to protect your stock price. Say that clearly, Preston." The room was silent. "That is not what My son was brought into this world through a crime committed against both his mother and me. His mother is one of the most capable, intelligent, formidable women I have ever encountered. And you are standing in my boardroom suggesting I should be ashamed of my child." He looked around the table. "Anyone who feels that way," he said, "is welcome to resign today." I will have HR process your paperwork by end of business." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Preston Hale sat down. Celestine heard about the meeting from Dominic's assistant that evening. She waited until Solomon was asleep. Then she walked to Dominic's home office. He had started spending most evenings in the residence, and she knocked. He said, "Come in." She stood in the doorway. You defended us today, she said. He looked up from his desk. I defended my family, he said simply. The word landed between them like a stone in still water. Family. Celestine felt it move through her. She stepped into the room. Dominic! Jay. She stopped. Jay, she said, and his name in her mouth felt like something new. I need to ask you something honestly. Ask. What is this? She gestured between them. Because I came here with a DNA report and a legal case. That's what this was supposed to be. And now you're… She pressed her lips together. You're defending my son's honor in boardrooms, and you're holding him at 2 a.m. when I'm too tired to think, and you're learning his sounds, the way he… Her voice caught. The way he makes that specific cry when he wants to be held, not fed, and you know that already, and I don't… She stopped. She crossed her arms over her chest. I don't know what to do with you, she said. Dominic stood up. He walked toward her slowly. He stopped close enough that she had to look up slightly. I am not trying to complicate your life, he said. I know what you said at the beginning. I know you set boundaries. I have respected them. You have, she admitted. But I would be lying, he said, if I told you this is still just a legal arrangement for me. And I don't lie, Celestine. She looked at him. You terrify me, she said quietly. That surprised him. She could see it. Why? Because I built my whole life around not needing anyone like this, not needing anyone who has this much… She gestured at him, at all of him. Power. Over situations, over rooms, over… She stopped herself. Over you? He said softly. She held his gaze. I am not saying it. You don't have to. They stood in the quiet of the office. Solomon made a small sound from the baby monitor on the desk. They both looked at it, and then they both looked back at each other. And Celestine Monroe, who had walked into a lion's den with nothing but the truth and her own backbone, let out a long breath. I need time, she said. You have it. And I need you to keep doing what you're doing. A pause. What am I doing? She looked at him directly. Showing me who you actually are, she said, instead of who you want me to think you are. He was quiet. Those are the same person, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said softly. That's the problem. She turned and walked out, and Dominic stood in his office for a long time after, with something in his chest that felt dangerously like hope. The verdict in the Ashby case came on a Wednesday. Guilty on 7 counts, federal charges, minimum 12 years. The other 4 women had joined the civil case, and the settlement was significant, enough to change lives. When Celestine got the call, she was in the park across from the residence, Solomon in his stroller, headphones on, listening to nothing in particular. She pulled out the headphones. She sat with it for a moment. 12 years. She thought about the day she had sat in a doctor's office at 20 weeks and been told something was wrong with her file. She thought about the months of digging through medical records and legal documents and sleepless nights trying to understand what had been done to her. She thought about walking into Quan Empire headquarters with a belly and a folder and absolutely nothing else to lose. She looked at Solomon. He was awake, staring up at the sky with those wide, dark eyes that had both of them in them somehow. We did it, she whispered. He made a sound. She laughed. It came out wet and loud and completely undignified. She pressed her hand over her mouth and laughed until she was crying in a park on a Wednesday afternoon with her son looking at her like she had lost her mind. And she had never felt so free. Dominic found her still in the park. He had gotten the same call. He walked across the grass and sat beside her on the bench. They didn't say anything for a while. The city moved around them. Solomon had fallen asleep. Finally, Celestine said, It's over. The case, Dominic said carefully. She turned to look at him. Yes, the case. A pause. What about the rest? He asked. She looked at Solomon. The rest, she said slowly, is just beginning. She looked at Dominic. I called my mother this morning, before the verdict. I told her some things. What things? Celestine's jaw tightened just slightly. not in anger, in the way of someone trying to be brave. I told her about you, the real version, not the legal version. Dominic was very still. She wants to meet you, Celestine said. He blinked. She does. Don't get excited, Celestine said. She's from Atlanta. She's going to look you dead in the eye and tell you exactly what happens to you if you hurt me or her grandbaby. She has a look that has made grown men reconsider their entire lives. I look forward to it, he said. Celestine looked at him. You're serious? Completely. She shook her head slowly. Jay. He turned at his name in her voice. I'm not easy, she said. I need you to know that. I have opinions about everything. I talk too much when I'm nervous. I make decisions fast and I don't always explain my thinking. I will challenge you constantly. I don't back down. I know, he said. I'm telling you now, so you can't say you weren't warned later. Celestine. He looked at her directly. I have been looking for someone to challenge me my entire life. Everyone around me agrees with everything I say. It is, he paused, extraordinarily boring. She stared at him. Then she laughed, really laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, and Dominic, who had not laughed easily in years, laughed with her. There was a moment, later that evening, when they were both in the kitchen. Solomon was in his little bouncer on the counter. Dominic was attempting to make tea and doing it incorrectly. Something about the water temperature that Celestine found deeply offensive. She pushed him aside with her hip without ceremony and took over. He stood beside her and watched. She could feel him watching. She said without looking up, There's something I've been needing to say to you. Say it. She kept her eyes on the kettle. Thank you, she said, for believing me. That first day, you had every reason to call security and have me removed and bury the whole thing, but you didn't. I couldn't have done that, he said. You could have, she said. Men like you do it all the time. I told you, he started. I know, you're not like them. She finally looked at him. And the terrifying part is, I actually believe you. He looked at her. The kitchen was warm and small, and Solomon was making sleepy sounds, and Dominic Kwan reached up and tucked one loose braid back from her face, very slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't step back. She just looked at him. I don't know how to do this gently, he said. I have never done anything gently in my life. I don't need gentle, she said quietly. I need honest. Then honestly, he said, I have felt more alive in the last 3 months than in the last 10 years, and it is because of you. Not Solomon, not the case, you. Celestine held his gaze. Solomon made a loud, sudden sound, and they both jumped. And then they both looked at him, and he was just happily kicking his feet. And they looked at each other, and the laughter came again. Softer this time, the kind that belongs to people who are becoming something. Then Celestine said, I've been offered a position. He looked at her. At a patient advocacy firm. They specialize in medical rights cases. They saw my work on the Ashby case and She smiled quietly. They want me to head their research division. That's exactly right for you, he said immediately. She looked at him. You're not going to say anything about the timing? About Solomon? Why would I? He said. It's exactly right for you. Solomon will be taken care of. You were not built to sit still, Celestine. I would never ask you to. She looked at him for a long moment. Do you know how rare that is? She said softly. What? A man who sees what a woman is supposed to be, and doesn't try to make her smaller so he can feel bigger. He looked at her. You could never be made smaller, he said. You would burn the building down first. She laughed. Then she leaned her head back and looked at the sky. I'm going to take the job, she said. Good. And I'm going to stay. She didn't look at him. Here, with Solomon, with... She paused. I'm going to stay. A beat. With me? He said carefully. She looked at him sideways. Don't make it weird, she said. He pressed his lips together. I'm not making it weird. You're making a face. I'm not making a face. This is my face. That is not your regular face. He was fully smiling now. She was smiling too, even as she tried not to. Jay. Celestine. She turned to face him fully. I'm staying, she said. That's what I'm saying. Whatever this is, she gestured between them. I'm in it, carefully and slowly, and on my terms. He reached over and took her hand. On your terms, he confirmed. She looked at their hands. We're going to argue all the time, she said. I know. I'm going to be right most of the time. Debatable. Dominic Jaewon Kwan. I said debatable, not wrong. She shook her head, but she didn't pull her hand back. And something that had started with a lie was slowly, stubbornly becoming the most true thing either of them had ever lived. If this moved you, if you felt every bit of what Celestine carried and every moment Dominic showed up when it mattered, hit that like button right now and leave a comment that just says Solomon, so I know you watched until the very end. And if you want more stories like this, dark, real, powerful, with women who never apologize for who they are, subscribe, because the next story coming to this channel is going to hit even harder. I'll see you there.